Hey y'all, welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank, and today I'm with Josh Lastine. How you doing, Josh?
Hey, Frank, I'm doing well. Hey, Geek Freaks, thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Of course. Josh is an entertainment lawyer, a very busy profession, as we were just talking about, with the last 4 years in Hollywood kind of rebuilding. Can you kind of give us a brief description of what that would be, entertainment law?
Yeah, it's really different from most people. When they think of lawyer, they think of court and judge and arguing and guilty and, all of that stuff. That is not at all what I do. I am strictly what I call a transactional entertainment lawyer, meaning I'm a deal maker. I negotiate deals, I draft contracts, I draft deal memos, I work with actors, writers, directors, celebrities in their own personal engagements, whether that's, in front of the camera or behind the camera. And then, working with larger production companies, studios, and media companies to help supervise the legal affairs and deal makings day to day on any given project. So, a lot of people don't think about it, but when you're watching something on screen, like your Marvel movie, for example, literally everything that you're seeing that appears on screen has to have had a contract at some point. It's had to have gone through a business and legal affairs process. It's had to go through some form of deal making. And I kind of sit at like the hub, or kind of like the time variance authority, if you will, kind of outside of the production, kind of overseeing, supervising day to day, working with, the holy triangle, if you will, boots on the ground, physical production guys, the guys with the cameras, the lights, equipment, the actors, those physically on the ground shooting day to day, working with them in relation to, the suits at the network or the studio, the guys controlling the purse strings, those that are controlling the budget and saying, what we can and cannot spend on this or that. And then finally, your head creatives, your showrunner, if it's a television show, or your directors and producers, if it's a feature film, it's those three entities all coming together that make a film or TV project. And my job is to kind of play monkey in the middle, if you will, or rodeo clown, to get all of those people together, Larry, Curly, Moe, clawed their heads together and get deal making done so that, the content that you enjoy, that I enjoy, that we all love can be on screen, whether that's, on Disney Plus or in the theaters or on YouTube or on this podcast even. So, I represent a lot of different types of, how do you say, medias, I guess, whether that's traditional film and television or podcasts or singer, songwriter, musicians, EPs, music producers, influencers, anyone who monetizes their personality, so to speak. If they're getting into day-to-day contracts, they, should have somebody looking over those contracts on their behalf. And so, I've worked with a number of recognizable studios that, you probably all are familiar with. I've worked at Marvel Studios, I've worked at Amazon Studios, and then, for the last 4 years, I've run my own law firm out here in Beverly Hills, where we do a little bit of mix of representing talent and companies, like I talked about. So, like I said, it's very different from Suits or, Presumed Innocent or whatever it is that you're watching, latest courtroom drama. But, honestly, if you've seen Deadpool and Wolverine, that came out this past weekend, it's funny. A movie like that could have not existed when we were kids growing up.
No way.
Level of inside knowledge of what you need to know about Hollywood and the entertainment industry, and just the jargon and the references and stuff. Like, it's incredible to me that a movie like that can stand on its own 2 feet. And I
Hmm.
was watching this past weekend, and I was like, if I didn't work in this business, I don't know that I would get all of these jokes. But that is more akin to what it is that I do. All of the
Yeah.
Hollywood back and forth drama you see about rights and reversions, and you can play with these characters, but not those characters. That is very much my work.
It feels like for Deadpool and Wolverine, like first step, get a bunch of lawyers in a room and see what we could even do. Because back in the day, it was exciting when like G.I. Joes and Transformers did something together, and they're owned by the same people. And for this one, you had 3 different studios, one being bought and whatever. Yeah, it had to be pretty complicated for the lawyers.
Yeah, I don't envy being a Disney lawyer for multiple reasons. For multiple reasons.
Yeah, it's a busy time for them. Okay, so we talked about how you're dealing with these 3 different assets of filmmaking. Really, with the recent strikes we had last year, were you pretty involved in all this strike business, or at least trying to give some advice where you could with the actors? You also have like IATSE out there too that was being impacted. How do you get yourself involved in that?
So the guilds themselves all have their own representation, and I'm actually very close with some of the attorneys that work for SAG and work for the WGA, and so to that sense, I'm very much impacted by what's going on. I had a lot of writers who their client writers whose projects got stalled. I have actor clients who couldn't work during that period of time. I can't say that I personally had a hand in the negotiations
Of course.
between Duncan Crabtree and the AMPAT, but I was there on the picket line. I was outside Disney. I was outside Warner Brothers with my clients, trying to show and advocate support. In addition to being an entertainment lawyer, I also teach at Los Angeles Film School. I teach to undergraduate filmmakers, entertainment business. It's an entertainment business degree, more or less. So we have a lot of thought, theory, and discussion as it relates to the issues that were being, protested or striked upon as it relates to AI and things like that. I could write a whole entire book about all of that stuff, but we'll save that for another time.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the changes that we've experienced in Hollywood over the last, the last 4 years have been extremely impactful with the pandemics and the strikes, but even going back, to the very early days in my career, I moved out to LA 2010, 2011. It was just off of the last writer's strike that took place. And it was, a very, very different time in Hollywood. Iron Man 1 with Robert Downey Jr. had just come out, 2 years before that. And if you were seeing just this new wave of Hollywood. And by the time I graduated law school, streaming was a thing that was never around before, and what we call high budget premium SVOD television, subscription video on demand, your House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, Man in the High Castle, which is a show that I worked on. Those were really first of their kind back in 2012, 2013, 2014. And now we are 10 years later, 2024, we are seeing the end results of a lot of that experimenting, a lot of that pushing the envelope in terms of television, SVOD television, streaming television, your high budget Netflix and Apple and Amazon shows. We're at the end of this 10-year experience, and they're starting to realize that the profitability of those projects is fewer and farther between. It's a lot of money for your dragons.
Yeah.
Although I would say that the dragons probably get a pretty good ROI, but I don't know about the Lord of the Rings. But
Yeah.
the amount of money that they're putting on screen now isn't necessarily making sense towards what they're getting in terms of ROI. It's a part of a longer discussion about how television and Hollywood makes money in general, but just the changes in Hollywood from 2010, 2014, 2024, it's incredible how much things have changed.
Josh, you're starting like 10 episodes I want to discuss. I want to make all these different episodes with you now, right off the bat. Let's go back to your time at school, actually, because, yeah, you went from Iowa, you came on out here to Hollywood, and then you went to Pepperdine. You were in school at a very interesting time, because I think Hollywood, like you were talking about, is shifting from, broadcast television being a mainstay. Like your goal was to get on TV, and now you have people who are making their stardom on YouTube, and they're like, you were on TikTok, you want to get to YouTube type of thing. How did you adjust, especially with you learning at a time when all that was changing?
So, just being flexible and being where the audience is, and watching what the audience is watching, and then just being a fan of myself. I would say, as a personal consumer, I watch 3 to 4 to 5 hours of YouTube for every 1 to 2 to 3 hours of Netflix. You know what I mean? And so it's realizing that the consumer tastes have changed, the trends have changed. But then also realizing, there's a much longer game here to be played. I do feel very strongly that good filmmaking in general, is an art that will never go away. And it really kind of makes you see that what is good across time periods. You know what I mean? You can go back and watch movies from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and what good is consistently good. And while the consumer trends will change as it relates to things like TikTok and influencers and podcasts and how we spend some of our leisure time that way, I don't think we as a society will ever stop consuming traditional film and TV, if you want to call it that.
But do you feel like a lot of the Hollywood, especially maybe the older branches of it, are starting to realize how valuable things like YouTube are? I'm looking at like Dropout, for example, is a streaming service basically built on YouTube that's finding its success with being small. Do you think that, say Universal can adjust to that?
I don't know if some of the larger institutions, I think, will be very, very slow towards turning a eye towards building out more content channels on digital streaming or digital, YouTube or whatnot. I don't know that the outside of your Mr. Beasts, there hasn't been a clear sign that they're able to monetize that in a very successful way. I think, sure, someone might be able to crack that cookie, but what you're talking about is more kind of like mobilizing niche audiences, which I think is really is not the thing of the future. It's what's already here. It's what people are already doing. It's like, again, going back to what I was saying in terms of watching a couple hours of YouTube a day, I'm watching 5 hours of YouTube, but my 5 hours of YouTube is very different from your 5 hours of YouTube. Exactly. And the content creators that I'm watching are so niche that they may only have, a couple 100,000, if maybe 1 million followers at best.
Yeah.
But that's my little niche corner of the internet. It helps day-to-day creators. It helps day-to-day artists. It helps people who want to make a living doing this kind of stuff. It gives them an opportunity that I don't think's ever existed before. Yeah. But at the same time, I think that it makes it harder to stand out and become ubiquitously popular, ubiquitously famous. You know what I mean? Like
of course.
There's not so much of a general consensus as to what is popular as there once was, because we're all kind of in our own little niche community. companies.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, you can't find a way for something like Universal or whatever to make a profit out of just such a niche little audience. Yeah, you almost need to build a platform for them to be on, but something like Google has already been ahead of that. So, yeah, it's interesting to see these worlds collide and see how they can intermingle and stuff. Very interesting. So you have worked in your earlier careers. You worked with the Creative Artists Agency, Lionsgate, Viacom, CBS. With those like major studios you've worked with, what are some of the takeaways you've gotten from those?
It's really just the amount of excellence that you bring forth to the job. All of those companies just demand such a heightened level of professionalism and excellence that, you know, being a farm kid from small town Iowa,
Hmm.
growing up in town of 300 people, I don't know that I knew back then what I was signing up for, but just, learning how to swim, being thrown in a sink or swim environment and kind of, how do you say, Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. I had
Yeah.
some really, it, I'll be honest, in the early portions of my career, I took my lumps. I did a lot of unpaid internships. I did a lot of odd jobs that, a lawyer or a law student, law clerk, you wouldn't think would want to do. But, Hollywood is one of those places where you really have to pay your dues. You really have to know your stuff, and you really kind of have to rise up in the ranks and start out at the bottom. And companies like Lionsgate, companies like CAA, they really do recruit only from the best of the best, and it's kind of like sword sharpening sword, right? In terms of all of us working together and all of
Yeah.
us rising up together, and it actually works out pretty cool because I'm now 10 years outside of my first job at CAA, and a lot of those people that I worked with at CAA originally, they're still either my friends, my clients. They refer clients my way. They're agents now. They're managers now. They're writers or development executives in their own right. And we've all, spent the last 10, 15 years cutting our teeth trying to move up and rise together in the entertainment industry. So it's just, it's awesome to see people want to, be very good at their jobs,
Yeah.
and all work kind of in concert towards a larger goal, which is, like I think that anytime you're working on a film or TV project, you're kind of subservient to the larger project at hand, or the story that you're trying to tell or whatever. So
Yeah. And it sounds like a
yeah.
lot of it's about community or these connections that you're going to need, and the ones you formed early on are still paying off today.
Oh goodness, I call it seed planting, and you
Hmm.
never know when you're going to meet somebody in 5, 10, 15 years. They could turn around and you'll be doing a deal with them.
Hmm.
I signed a new client a few months back, and who was auditioning for a show. The producers for that show happened to be the producers for one of the very first shows that I worked on when I first moved to Hollywood 10 years prior. Hadn't worked with them since, but obviously remembered each other and remembered working with each other. And it just made that deal making go that much smoother, that much friendlier. It's a very small industry, as it relates to us kind of all being in short connection with one another,
Yeah. Yeah. On the law
especially out
side.
here in
Yeah.
LA, Hollywood, Beverly Hills.
Speaking to that, actually, we're talking. I talked with a recent interview about how Atlanta's kind of becoming a big spot, and Toronto. Do you have connections that you have to kind of spread across the country now, more so than just in LA?
I do. And how do I say, you know, since I've been out here in 2010, 2011, 2012, those hubs have all been very not well established, but were already kind of already establishing themselves in of their own right. So I've
Hmm.
worked to cultivate relationships in a lot of those territories, like Atlanta, like Vancouver, New Orleans, New Mexico, and then some other places abroad. But it's always, at least since I've been part of the industry felt like a very international, collaborative community. And I have clients all around the world filming in all sorts of different countries and territories.
So you never actually get to sleep. You got that phone on that pillow next to you then.
I've learned to compartmentalize, and we call it the bat signal. You know, call once, twice, 3 times, and I'll pick up depending on the the level of emergency.
That could be tough on the sleep. Let's go over some of the big projects that you've been involved in so many projects, but some of the people might recognize these. We got Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, a show that people should have watched for sure. The Simpsons. We've got Orange is the New Black, Transparent, Mad Men, loved it. Then big movies like Age of Ultron and Guardians of the Galaxy. Which of these were your favorite? What did you take away from these big projects?
You know, going back, you mentioned The Simpsons, and I think I saw that on your guys' profile as one of your favorite TV shows as well. The Simpsons is just something that I can always turn to as a source of comfort, and like I can just always put it on the background. It will always make me laugh. You know, after 36 seasons or whatever it is, I'm always discovering new episodes even to this day. And it was, I think, working on, so I worked for Stars. This was many years ago, but I worked for Stars, which was owned by Anchor Bay, which owned Film Roman, the animation studio. And that was the animation studio that did all the animation work for The Simpsons. And I remember getting this assignment, and it was the first like assignment that I got that I was really like, whoa, like this is so cool. And it was a animation vendor service agreement between basically The Simpsons and Robot Chicken.
Wow.
They were engaging the producers of Robot Chicken to create a couch gag scene for the opening montage, The Simpsons, you know, the couch gag, you know, whatever. Yeah. And so just like, you know, it's a little silly, a little nerdy because like I'm a lawyer, right? And just like pen and paper and all this stuff. But to see these things, to see how this looks on pen and paper and to know, oh, like somebody's got to contract this person and they got to hire them to produce animatics, and it's got to go through this approval process, and they get paid, you know, this much on signature and this much on delivery of first draft and final delivery, and like just like all these little kind of ins and outs and weird stuff that you don't think about as being a fan. I find that weirdly cool, nerdy, interesting, you know. Again, going back to Age of Ultron, I got to work on the VFX deal for the physical asset for the people who created the Hulkbuster armor that they would then, you know, take all of the different 3D shots they would put in the CGI computer and they'd render it on top. You know, it's really that kind of behind the scenes stuff that got me into this to begin with. You know, as a kid growing up, I think I was always more interested in watching the behind the scenes or the makings of, or the bloopers or the interviews, the commentaries that went along with movies, right? I was always so into seeing how they made the Death Star, how they made the X-Wings, how they made Dagobah and stuff, you know, along with the movie itself. But just seeing that behind-the-scenes stuff was really cool. And now I kind of have my fingers in everything because it's my job to sometimes wrangle in the art department and the props department and locations and equipment and actors and hair and makeup and, you know, get all of these different departments making sure that they're doing their jobs and doing things correctly, at least as it relates to contracts, deal making, protocols on set and stuff.
I'm fully there with you. There's so many times where I'm, you know, talking. I'm the annoying guy that's like, "Hey, by the way, this actor and that director worked together on this other movie," and you know, so I'm right there with you on all that. That's great.
Well, but it's such a small town, and that's how it works. You know, I just had to do something today where I signed a new client, and they're like, "Hey, we look at this deal," and it came over from another client, and so I had to text that client and say, you know, "Hey, look. Hey, we got a conflict here," and it's just that, you know, everyone in this town, it's very incestual in terms of working together over and over again. So
yeah. Well, speaking with new clients, we're in an age now where just the right TikTok video will get you popular enough to where you have to actually start, worrying about yourself a little bit. At what point should you, as a content creator type, start looking at getting law services?
It's really tough to say. My short answer is that, it's never too early to start building those connections. If that's what your ultimate goal is to be a media personality, to make a living monetizing your talent, for what lack of a better word, whatever that is. I think it's never too soon to start cultivating and building those relationships. But I mean, if you're making 75 to 100,000, if you're making your primary living off of your talent, I think it's very appropriate to reach out and at least start a discussion with an entertainment lawyer.
And then how does that evolve over time? Do you start giving them advice on how to protect themselves at this state, or are you also kind of like, hey, I know this person or that person who could help you grow? How involved do you get in that person's career?
So, I don't step on the toes of a manager or an agent by any means, but, I only take on clients that I'm very vested in working with directly. I only work with clients that I truly firmly believe in their goal and their mission and their art and what it is that their talent, right? I've kind of alluded to it several times. So, to that end, I'm not making money if my clients aren't making money. That's the most beautiful thing about my job in terms of being a lawyer. Most lawyers you call when you have a problem. Most lawyers you call because you got in trouble and you're going to court, and they make their money off of people's misery and suffering. I make my money when people are making movies and getting hired for gigs and being hired for modeling jobs and writing jobs and stuff like that. So generally speaking, when people come to my office, it's for good reasons, right? It's because they've found a way to make money off of their talent. So, to that end, I try to do everything within my brain wheelhouse and power to help my clients succeed, I guess.
Yeah. What are some of the common pitfalls you see for some of the newer content creators? Like, for example, one of the things I've learned over time is, hey, you might want to register or buy the license for the music you're about to use and stuff like that. Things that you might not realize at first. What are some of the common pitfalls you come across?
For smaller content creators, it's really just little things like just even reviewing your own scripts or transcripts to make sure that there's not anything that can be seen as maybe slightly defamatory towards somebody else, making sure that you have proper clearances if you're showing artwork in the background or having on high profile personalities that may require an appearance release of some sorts. Learning, in terms of signing brand deals and endorsement deals, that not only focusing so much of how much you're getting paid, but when you're getting paid, the triggers of that payment. Someone who produces contents or cuts or reels or things of that nature, like how many cuts do you have to turn over? How many edits do you have to do? Those are kind of some of the pitfalls that I see younger content creators walking into.
Yeah, so many things that they wouldn't even know, and here you've paved the road, seeing it 100 times. See other people do it, so it's great.
And to be real honest, I think the biggest thing, the biggest, I don't want to call it amateur thing, but like the biggest thing that young artists should learn is to just ask. Empty mouths don't get fed. It really, if there's something that's going to make your art, your craft, your services, if there's something that you need to perform your job well, be communicative of that. Life is a negotiation. Everything is a negotiation. And I understand that it's sometimes scary to put forth that kind of I need X, Y, and Z thing to make this deal happen or whatever. But being open, honest, communicative, and having a dialogue about what your needs are, that's probably the biggest amateur mistake. You're not vocal enough about what it is that you need.
Yeah. Now, 4 years ago, was probably the hardest time to start anything, but you decided to start Lastine Entertainment Law. What a tough job to be like, hey, you know what? It's a pandemic. Let me start a new business. What do you do? How do you decide to do that?
Not by choice, a little bit more by
Okay.
circumstance.
Yeah.
I previously was at another law firm where I was outside counsel to a large studio for many years. And I kind of decided that it was time to move on from that. And I was interviewing at a lot of different places. And I was courted by Viacom CBS, who was going through major corporate changes, and had just merged CBS and Viacom together at
Yeah.
the time. And so, at the height, November, December 2019, it was looking like a really cool place to potentially go and start. In 2020, it was going to be a new year. And they were, really working on some really cool and interesting stuff. Fast forward to March of 2020, the pandemic happened. They had a mass shutdown order across all, everywhere, right? Not alone just
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hollywood, but for myself in particular, because what I do is so intricately tied to day-to-day filmmaking. My department specifically was put on hiatus and then eventually let go. So, I think I was furloughed or laid off throughout the most of the summer of 2020. But then by fall to winter 2020, going into spring 2021, production started to pick back up again. The industry started to turn around just a little bit. I started to get phone calls. I started to get inquiries from potential clients. And it just was like, this feels like the right time to do something different, to go out on my own, to try something for myself, to bet on myself. I don't know that I'm going to have another opportunity where, I had just gotten married, but I don't have kids yet. We have
Mhm.
relatively lower cost of living relative to other people who live in LA and stuff. And I'm like, I want to take this gamble on myself because I know even if I fail, I'll, be glad that I did it. But if I succeed, in 10 years, hopefully I'll have built a very cool entertainment law firm, very cool business. That, as we've alluded to many times throughout this podcast, the entertainment industry is just constantly changing. And I'm very much kind of in between this old world where I was, trained by more legacy media creators, trained in more of the traditional film and television world. But at the same time, I still have my foot in the door in the new media and how things are done now. So, it just felt like a very proper time to kind of be that hopefully one of the founding law firms in a new era of Hollywood.
Yeah, it seems like you and Lastine Entertainment Law, like it would be such an asset to some of these bigger companies because you have your youth. You see things as a consumer with, again, those 4 hours on YouTube, like myself. That's my primary entertainment source is YouTube. And so there's an insight that you have that I think is not innate to maybe just a big law firm somewhere.
Yeah, and honestly, you can ask a hundred different entertainment lawyers, and you'll get 100 different answers. But I think that there's some entertainment lawyers who really like just being a lawyer. I
Hmm.
feel like I wear many different hats between being a lawyer, being a therapist, being a creative, being business acclimated. I very much fancy myself a cinephile, if you will, and very much try to keep myself in the know so I can lend those services tangentially to my clients in addition to being a good
Yeah. That's amazing. And also, yeah, you mentioned Cinephile. It was on your bio as well. And I've been watching that lightsaber this entire time.
yeah.
What are you collecting nowadays?
So I collect Marvel Legends. Oh
Nice.
gosh, and they're all around me right now. I primarily collect Marvel Legends,
Hmm.
and then I have a good stack of Dragon Ball Z SH figure arts. I used to collect Legos, but man, those are hard to keep,
Oh,
organized and together, and pieces
yeah.
start falling and breaking off and stuff. I think the wife will kill me if I collect anything more. So I got pretty much all of the Marvel heroes and villains that I want. So maybe Shire 2 or 3, but yeah, that's I only have maybe 5 or 6 Funko Pops. Those aren't Funko Pops behind you though. Those are something else.
These are all Funko Pops up here. Yeah.
Those are all Funko Pops. Okay.
Yeah. Legends though are such a great way to. I mean, they're so detailed. They did a great job of the Legends run. Those are good. I love those.
Well, it's so funny because I mean, we probably don't have time for it, but the history of Marvel Legends is so intricately entwined with the history of Marvel Studios. And myself, I started collecting Marvel Legends action figures in 2004, 2005. So very young when I was a kid growing up. And then the Toy Biz brand went bankrupt, and then that's kind of what also spurred the advent of Marvel Studios and bringing on all these licensing deals and creating that into a film franchise. But it really wasn't until Hasbro picked up the license again in 2014 that they continued making the action figures. And I think I started recollecting the line in 2016, and I've been collecting ever since. So yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, it's fun to know that someone who's helping, work with Marvel on one side is a fan on this side, and we see it with a lot of things like Kevin Feige and stuff like that. And I know you've done some work. There was something about I know we're towards the end here, but you were hauling a poster that was signed for him. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Oh
goodness. So I was an intern at Marvel when they got bought out by Disney, and we were making the move from the Manhattan Beach Rosecrans office to the Burbank lot. And it was just some hot summer afternoon or whatever, and all of Kevin Feige's signed movie posters, like the framed ones that he has hanged in his office with Avengers and all of the Avengers signed, they were down at the bottom of the Frank G. Wells building, which is the business center on the Disney lot. And the office assistant at the time, she was a good friend, and she was like, 100 pounds soaking wet, if that. And these are just ginormous, heavy framed movie posters worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. This was at the height of Marvel. And she's like, Josh, can you help me take these up to Kevin's office? And I'm like in my suit and tie and just like a little nerdy legal intern. And yeah, I ended up carrying up like all of Kevin's like signed posters into his office, which was, I thought, pretty cool. But yeah, so that's my kind of thing.
That's a great party story right there.
Yeah. And then fast forward 10 years later, and I'm negotiating deals with his brother. So it's,
That's amazing. Well, Josh, it has been fascinating talking to you. I really appreciate you hanging out with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Geek Freaks. I'd be happy to come back and talk again.
Of course.
So yeah, no, love the conversation.
Wonderful. Everybody, in the links in the description, you're going to find Josh's social media handles and, of course, his website. Check it all out, guys. It's super interesting. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.